Okay, we've got some background behind us now. We've talked about the discourse. That helps because there are parallels between the discourse and Descartes' meditations on first philosophy. It's the meditations we're going to talk about now. Now, I'm not going to say anything about the synopsis, at least not in this video. So I just want to talk about meditation 1. Let's see if we can just get through this with some conciseness. Okay, so in meditation 1, Descartes tells you why he's doubtful, why he's worried about the so-called knowledge that he's accumulated, right? He realizes that he has believed false things in the past, right? And probably he believes some false things right now, but he doesn't know which of his beliefs are false and which are not. So as he already said in the discourse, he does think he should, at least once in his lifetime, just clear the board, clear everything away, get rid of all his beliefs and start over, right? So that's what he's aiming to do here in the first meditation. By the time you get to the end of the first meditation, he says he's doubted all his beliefs, right? So after the first meditation, we get constructive, or certainly Descartes gets constructive. Here in the first meditation, there's a lot of destruction. Okay? Now, he can't just claim everything that he believes is false. There are a couple of reasons for that. One of the reasons is just insisting that something is false won't do him much good. He needs motivation. He needs a method. I mean, there's a method of doubt here. That is to say, he proceeds to exercise doubt, that he has to do something to doubt, right? So he can't just, again, claim things are false by fiat, just declare them false. He's going to have to do something to bring about a state of doubt. And then secondly, as he notes in the text, he can't just go through his beliefs one at a time and declare each one false separately, or exercise a method of doubt even on each one separately. There are too many beliefs there. I would say he doesn't get into this point, but I would say everybody has indefinitely many beliefs. That is to say, you have no idea how many beliefs you have. For instance, today, do you know the date? Do you know what day of the week it is? Do you know how many days there are in the week? Do you know where you are? Just think about context. You know, are you generally oriented? Do you know when and where you are? There's a lot of beliefs wrapped up into that. And also, when it comes to mathematics, you know, think about 1 plus negative 1. Well, that's 0. Well, what about 2 plus negative 2? Well, that's 0. As soon as I say it, you have a belief about it. So maybe you never thought about 1,000 plus negative 1,000. But as soon as I say it, you have a belief about what the answer to that is. You know, or anything plus 1, 99 plus 1, 1,002 plus 1. Maybe you never had the explicit thought about 1,002 plus 1, but as soon as you think of it, you have a belief about what the answer is. Did you already have that belief, or did it follow immediately from beliefs you already have? I don't think it's that clear, and Descartes doesn't want to get into it. So he doesn't say it as explicitly as I'm saying it, but I think he's suggesting that, well, he doesn't know how many beliefs he has, so he can't go through them one by one. Even if he had a number and he knew how many, how would he systematically go through them? I mean, it's one thing to have a number, it's another to have an organized list. So he needs a general method for doubting, right? And his general method is based on the idea that knowledge has foundations, right? Now, knowledge may or may not have foundations. That's something that Descartes believes. He believes that knowledge is based on some general principles, general statements. So there's a lot of sub-statements resting on top of some broad general statements, right? So knowledge in this image is like a building. Now, if that's true, then you can bring the building down by taking out the bottom layer, or taking out the broadest principles. In other words, is knowledge really like a building? I don't know. A dictionary contains knowledge, and it's more like a spider web than it is like a building, right? You look up a word in the dictionary, what do you get? More words. You can look up each of those words. What do you get? More words, right? There are a lot of circles, right? If you keep looking up words, you might go in a lot of circles, and some of the circles will be more central than other circles. So knowledge could be like a web. The internet with hyperlinks is kind of like a web. I mean, part of it we call the World Wide Web. But in any case, that's a huge topic. So I just want to make it clear, okay, Descartes thinks knowledge is like a building, so he wants to doubt the broadest principles of knowledge, and then that will bring the rest of the building crashing down. How do we begin? Well, he claims, he's a little tricky here. He claims, well, pretty much everything we believe we got through the senses. I don't think that's Descartes' belief. So sometimes it's helpful to distinguish Descartes, the person, from the narrator of the Meditations. The narrator of the Meditations says things that are useful in the moment, but that Descartes probably isn't committed to. The idea that most of what we know, or what we think we know, comes from the senses is definitely something that the historical person Descartes didn't believe. In the synopsis, even though I said I wasn't going to really go over it, he did mention that he wanted to get people to think about knowledge apart from the senses, right? It's a goal of the text. It clearly is an explicit goal. So anyway, the narrator, the person inviting you in to think along with Descartes, says, hey, doesn't most of our knowledge come from the senses? Well, what's wrong with the senses? Should we doubt them? Well, we should. I mean, basically, in the first meditation, if you can doubt something, then you should doubt something, right? And the idea is, if we keep doubting things, eventually we might get to something we can't doubt. And then that would be a good foundation on which to rebuild knowledge, right? So this is why sometimes people talk about hyperbolic doubt in relation to Descartes. Hyperbolic meaning exaggerated here, right? If we can doubt it, we will doubt it. If we have any room for doubt at all, we'll treat it as false. That's exaggerated. That's an exaggerated doubt. Okay, so we can doubt the senses, so we will doubt the senses. How do we doubt them? Well, we start with sensory deception. So we're in stage one of doubt. In stage one of doubt, we're going to doubt the senses. The first step in the first stage is, hey, your senses deceive you sometime. What if something is very small or it's very far away? There could be a sort of square tower in the distance, and it could be so far away that you might think that it's round instead of square. Or, my own example, you could be walking across campus and you could see someone and you could think that that's your friend, and then you get closer and you realize, I don't know who that person is, right? And as you get older, it's harder to see these small things. I got some small things lying around my desk here. If something is far away or small, we might misperceive it. But, Descartes says, aren't there things that you know from the senses that you can't really doubt? So he gives examples like, I'm gonna sort of formulate my own, but in the spirit of what Descartes is saying. Well, aren't I in front of a computer screen right now? The computer screen isn't far away and it isn't small. So I could have doubts about details on the screen, but aren't I in front of a computer screen? Aren't I sitting in a chair? Isn't there lighting coming from the light fixtures above? Right? How could I doubt that stuff that I get through the senses? Then there's a sort of breakthrough. Descartes has this sort of epiphany. But haven't I had thoughts like that while I'm asleep in bed and I'm dreaming? Right? And so then he realizes, hey, anything I could perceive, I could dream. Right? If not, why not? Right? A nurse once told me, well, the olfactory part of your brain shuts down when you're sleeping, so you can't smell in your dream. Okay, but aren't there olfactory hallucinations? I mean, isn't it possible to have a dream or a dream state or hallucination where you smell things that aren't there? This happens when people have strokes. They smell burnt toast, I hear. But other kinds of olfactory hallucinations are possible. Remember, if we have any reason for doubt, we'll doubt. It's hyperbolic. Right? So, granted, empirically speaking, observationally speaking, there might be these limits that happen to exist on what we can dream, but conceptually speaking, how do we know the sensory stuff in our minds is being caused by objects out there? I mean, that's basically the position that Descartes is articulating here. When we say dream, we could be talking about something that happens when you're asleep, right? Or we could just be saying, well, sometimes you have a sensory impression and it's not caused by what seems to be causing it. And if that's a dream, if that's what we mean by dream, well, how would you ever know if what seems to be causing your sensory impression is the actual cause of your sensory impression? You can't step outside of your sensory impressions and compare the object in itself, apart from the sensory impressions, to the sensory impressions that are in you, right? To put the same thing differently, right? Here is an image of a book. Behold. Is the image of the book being caused by a book? I think so, because I think I'm awake. And I think I bought a book. Well, okay, the publisher gave it to me for free, to be honest. I think I got a book delivered to my house, and I think this is the book, and so I'm having an image of a book in my consciousness because there's a physical book next to me, and it's impinging on my eyeballs. I think that's what's going on. However, again, I can't step outside of my consciousness and see whether the conscious images match up to things that exist outside of and independent of the conscious images. I just reside in my own consciousness. Right? It's like the Matrix. Well, maybe that's an old reference for you. But some of you, no doubt, have seen the Matrix. So if we're in the Matrix, then all these images are coming at us, right? The architect of the Matrix has designed it that way, but the objects aren't there, right? I just see what the Matrix wants me to see. Okay, so that's stage one of doubt. We're only finished with stage one now. In order to finish doubting sensory perception, we had to invoke dreams. Right, so we did talk about basic mistakes I make in perception, but it wasn't good enough. It seemed like, well, some things pass that test, right? Some things get past, these basic mistakes I make. But I dream. So what about that? Well, that allows me to doubt any sensory perception I'm having right now. So I'm going to call that. I'm going to call those collectively sensory particulars. So at the end of stage one of doubt, I've doubted all the sensory particulars. But what about general knowledge of the world that I've gained through the senses? There's an interesting analogy here between dreaming and painting. So bear with me. Now we're getting into stage two of doubt. We're going to doubt general objects. We're finished doubting particulars. Okay, we're moving into stage two of doubt. We're gonna doubt more general things now. So think about painters. Painters can paint what they see in real life, right? And I can dream what I've experienced in real life. So a painter can paint a bowl of fruit, and I can dream of a bowl of fruit. And so what the painter paints and what I dream exists in general. Generally speaking, oranges exist and bowls exist, although if I'm presented with a bowl of oranges right now, I could say, well, that might be a dream orange. That particular orange might be a dream orange. That particular bowl might be a dream bowl. But I'm dreaming of oranges because oranges exist, just like that painter is painting oranges because oranges exist, and the painter is trying to depict oranges. Sounds fine. So I doubted the particular oranges, but I don't yet doubt that oranges exist, or that the orange exists. However, taking the painting analogy further, well, can't a painter analyze what he or she sees in the environment and take it apart and take little pieces out and then recombine the pieces into new objects? Can't a painter do that? Right? Can't a painter paint a unicorn or a chimera or myriad other things that don't exist? Types of things, let's say, that don't exist. Can't a painter do that? Right? If you paint an orange, right, on the one hand, that particular orange is just a painted orange, but on the other hand, oranges exist. If you paint a unicorn, that is a painted unicorn, but also that type of thing doesn't exist, right? So now, the conclusion of stage 2 of doubt is, well, couldn't my mind be making up types of things that don't exist? right? I think oranges exist, but what if I made up that type of thing? I think human bodies exist, but what if I made up that type of thing? Right? So stage 1, we doubt particulars. Stage 2, we doubt types or general objects. You know, the Fisher-Price toy with the dial. You pull a string and it makes the dial spin around and it lands on a picture of an animal, like the cow, and then the toy says, "The cow says moo," and then you spin it again and it lands on a frog or a picture of a frog, and the toy says, "The frog says beep beep." Well, that toy is talking about types or general objects, not particulars. It's not some particular cow named Bessie that says moo. That's not what the toy is telling you. The toy is telling you that the cow, a general object, says moo. You didn't know it was that sophisticated, did you? Now, by the end of stage 2, we've realized that our imaginations could synthesize types that don't exist. Now, the implication of that is, or the implication that Descartes is most interested in is, now the physical sciences are all suspect. Because astronomy is about the stars, and anatomy is about the human body, and geology is about the various minerals that exist, and chemistry is about the molecules that make things up, and so on. In other words, the physical sciences are about types of things, about general objects. Now, by the end of stage 2 of doubt, we've doubted general objects, we've doubted types, therefore we've doubted the physical or empirical or observational sciences, however you would like to phrase that. We've doubted physics, even. What we haven't doubted are the formal sciences, right? We haven't doubted logic and arithmetic and geometry, things like that, right? But since we're doing hyperbolic doubt, if we can doubt, we will doubt. Do we have any grounds for doubting arithmetic and geometry? At first it seems no, just like in the previous stage, and the stage before that. At first we want to say no. No, like, you know, behind me there's a bunch of books, and 2 dream books plus 2 dream books is 4 dream books. You know, 2 representations of a book plus 2 representations of a book is 4 representations of a book, or, you know, it doesn't matter that it's not real, right? Images can be added up, right? You can quantify them, so even if they don't correspond to an external reality, math still works. Even if it's just an image of something triangular, right? The angles add up to 180 degrees, right? Doesn't matter that the triangular looking thing isn't really there. Those angles still add up to 180 degrees. However, as Descartes says, he has an idea. Be careful here, this is what he says. He has an idea of an omnipotent God. It would be silly for him to say, I know an omnipotent God exists. That's how sometimes students read the text, so I'm trying to warn you. It's not what he says. He's doing doubt now. He's not going to say, I know an omnipotent God exists. He says, I have an idea of an omnipotent God, right? I have an idea of an all-powerful God. So that could exist. It's a coherent idea. So an omnipotent God could exist. And that God could bring it about that I'm totally mistaken about my arithmetical and geometrical knowledge. even though that seems like the most certain thing in the world, right? What am I really relying on? I'm just relying on my ability to look at an idea and see whether it makes sense. So I'm looking at the idea that 2 plus 2 equals 4, and I think, well, gosh, that's as clear and distinct as anything can be. That must be true. But what if God made me defective? Or what if God is interfering with my mind actively, on an active basis, every time I try to think about something like 2 plus 2 equals 4, or, how many angles a triangle has to have, or how many degrees you get when you add up all the angles, or things like that. What if God is actively messing with me every time I think about these things? So I think I know something with great certainty, and yet I don't. Things like this happen to us from time to time. But what if it were worse than we thought? And the most basic things that we thought were so clear and so certain, what if those things were false? And it could be because God is messing with us. Well, what about that? Well, that's reason to doubt. So we have some reason to doubt arithmetic and geometry. Now, Descartes does object to himself here. And then, of course, he rebuts his own objections. He says, okay, well, now wait a minute. Maybe God's too good to mess with our minds. God's too good to deceive us in this way that I'm imagining, like all the time. Well, it does seem incompatible with God's goodness to deceive us globally all the time. But on the other hand, it seems incompatible with God's goodness to let us be deceived ever. And we are deceived sometimes. So where does that leave us? Well, maybe I don't really know what's compatible with God's goodness. Because I definitely get deceived, and I definitely make mistakes. And it seems like God wouldn't let that happen because God is infinitely good. Infinitely good. That'll be proved later. Just wait. Right? So yeah, again, maybe it's not so clear what's compatible with God's goodness and what's incompatible with God's goodness, right? So that's the rebuttal to the objection. So the objection is maybe God's too good to deceive me all the time about everything. And the rebuttal to the objection is, well, it seems like he's too good to let me be deceived about anything ever, but that definitely happens, so I guess I don't know what's compatible with God's goodness. I thought I did, but maybe I don't know. And then there's another objection. Well, maybe God doesn't exist. Sure, let's go with that. Descartes is not impressed. He says, okay, so suppose God doesn't exist. Suppose. Well, how did you come into being? Through chance, through fate, right? What if it were by chance? What if, you were the product of a bunch of random mutations that got selected for adaptivity to some specific environment that some prior species happened to be in at some specific moment in time? That's pretty random, right? I mean, we talk about survival of the fittest, but that's an overblown phrase. What's really happening is certain traits are getting selected for being adaptive in a certain environment at a certain period in time. Right? It's a bit arbitrary. It's a bit random. Right? Descartes has no idea how natural selection works because he never heard of Darwin or anything, but that's our best story about how chance could lead to something good happening, biologically speaking. Well, why would you expect a good outcome from that, is what Descartes is getting at, right? You're making the cause of my being less powerful and less good, so the outcome will be less beneficial, right? So in other words, remember, Descartes said, maybe God is tricking you. And then your response, not you specifically, but the reader's response was, well, maybe God doesn't exist. And Descartes is saying, okay, but God is all powerful and infinitely good, so at least God could make you perfect so that you knew stuff and you knew it really well. But if you just say, oh, I just came about by chance, I just happened to come into existence, well, that's not impressive, and we shouldn't trust our faculties. We should be skeptical, right? It's very dubious. We should think, oh, maybe our faculties don't really track the world as it actually is. Okay, so the thrust of all this, the bottom line is, okay, I have some reason to doubt arithmetic and geometry, right? At least insofar as they might tell me anything important, like about how the universe works or something like that. So I doubt arithmetic and geometry now. What's left? Well, Descartes says nothing. Descartes says he's now doubted everything that he can doubt. So let's see if I can find that in the text here. Yes. So on page 99, on the left column, near the bottom, Descartes just been talking about how God could be tricking him, and he gave the objections, and he rebutted the objections as we were just discussing, and he says, I am finally compelled to admit that there is nothing in the beliefs which I formerly held to be true about which one cannot raise doubts. And this is not a reckless or frivolous opinion, but the product of strong and well-considered reasoning. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. So he's doubted everything. Maybe he'll find something later that he can't doubt, and then he can build knowledge back on that basis. But right now, as far as he can tell, he's doubted everything that he formerly believed. So are we done? No, actually, that's the method of doubt. That's the 3 stages of doubt. We doubted sensory particulars, we doubted the general objects of the senses, then we doubted the formal sciences, arithmetic and geometry, and logic, although he doesn't really mention that explicitly like he did in the discourse. But we're not done. Meditation 1 isn't done. It's not enough to have doubted this stuff, he says. I've got bad habits. I'm used to believing that 2 plus 2 equals 4. I'm used to believing that the angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees, right? I'm just going to, if you ask me how many sides does a square have, I'm going to say 4 without thinking about it. It's habit. It's ingrained, right? So it's not enough to have doubted. He says, I need something to keep me on my toes. I need something to keep me doubting. So I'm going to pretend. This is pretense, folks. Be careful here. I'm going to pretend that an evil demon is trying to trick me all the time, right? So this evil demon makes it seem like there's a computer screen in front of me when there's not. And this evil demon makes it seem like oranges exist when oranges don't exist. And this evil demon fools me into thinking that the angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees, when in fact they don't. Right? So it's a very tricky demon. So that device, it's a mnemonic device. M-N-E-O-M-O-N-I-C, mnemonic, memory device. This memory device is supposed to balance things out. I've got bad habits. I tend to believe things I shouldn't believe. I'll keep reminding myself of the evil demon so that I can at least suspend judgment. Right? So I start to believe that 2 plus 2... I start to believe that I can use my mouth. I start to believe that 2 plus 2 equals 4, And then I think of the evil demon, and I think, oh no, I don't know. I don't know. It seems like 2 + 2 = 4, but I don't know. I'm non-committal, right? So I can sort of back off from my judgments, from my habitual beliefs, using the device of the evil demon. Okay, now we're finished with meditation 1. So we go into meditation 2, having doubted everything, actively doubting everything, using the evil demon. Stay tuned, and I'll give you a video on meditation 2.